The cruel kids taunted the quiet boy, never realizing he had traded his own childhood for the sake of his younger sister. Everything changed the day a stranger stepped in and turned the situation upside down. Everyone at school believed Ethan Carter was nothing more than an easy victim, a broke nobody they could push around. They sneered at his old, faded clothes, made fun of how little he spoke, and treated him like he didn't belong. To them, he was harmless, defenseless. What they failed to see was the truth. Ethan wasn't just a silent kid in class. He was a devoted older brother, a boy who had taken on responsibilities far heavier than any of them had ever carried. He didn't talk much, not because he was afraid, but because life had taught him to stay calm, endure, and keep moving. But the tormentors were about to discover that the quiet ones are not always the ones you should underestimate. At Willow Creek High, the usual noise filled the hallways. Lockers banging shut, students cracking jokes, footsteps echoing across the polished floors. Groups of teens gathered in circles, whispering about weekend plans, stressing about exams, or dissecting the latest rumors circling their small town. And then there was Ethan Carter, drifting through the hall like a shadow. Most people barely noticed him. Some overlooked him entirely. A few chose to mock him. Yet none of them knew the truth behind his silence. Ethan's clothes were always the same, a worn-out hoodie and faded jeans, making him stand out in all the wrong ways. His tired eyes, often looking down, carried a weight no 16-year-old should bear. He kept to himself, didn't make friends, and avoided the teasing and laughter of others. That made him the perfect target for Jason Miller. Jason was the kind of guy who commanded attention wherever he went. His father's money gave him style, confidence, and status. Tall, attractive, clad in designer jackets and pricey sneakers, he wore a smug grin that never left his face. People laughed at his jokes, whether they were funny or not. Jason had a particular hobby: finding the weakest, loneliest kids who wouldn't fight back. Ethan fit that description perfectly. "Look at him," Jason sneered, leaning on the lockers as Ethan passed. "Same outfit again. What's wrong, Carter? Mom forget to do the laundry?" His friends Tyler, Brent, and Cole snickered on cue. Ethan didn't stop walking. He never did. Jason, annoyed, stepped closer. "Hey, I'm talking to you." He shoved Ethan's shoulder sharply. Ethan stumbled but caught himself. "Are you deaf or just stupid?" Jason mocked. Ethan exhaled slowly. He could fight back if he wanted to. Life had thrown worse at him than Jason Miller ever could. But he had no time for this. Lunchtime in the cafeteria was a mix of chatter, clanging trays, and bursts of laughter. Ethan sat alone, as always, with a peanut butter sandwich and a small carton of milk. He ate quietly, head down, lost in thought, until Jason's shadow fell over him. "Oh man, this is sad," Jason announced loudly, ensuring everyone at the table could hear. "Sitting all alone, eating. What is that, a prison meal?" Brent leaned in with a smirk. "Maybe that's all he can afford." Ethan tightened his grip on the sandwich. Jason wasn't finished. "You know, Carter, maybe if you did something with your life, people would actually talk to you." Ethan continued eating. Jason scowled, hating being ignored. Then, as always, he acted. Jason reached forward and flipped Ethan's tray, sending food splattering across the table and onto his lap. The cafeteria fell silent. All eyes were on him. Ethan exhaled slowly, staring down at his ruined lunch. Then, without a hint of emotion, he lifted his gaze. Jason had expected anger, embarrassment, maybe even tears. Instead, Ethan calmly stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked away. No words. No reaction. Jason's confident smirk wavered. He didn't like being ignored, not one bit. But this wasn't the end. A few days later, Ethan opened his locker to find his money gone. The small savings from his part-time job had vanished. In its place was a note. "Thanks for the lunch money, loser." Jason and his friends, laughing and nudging each other from across the hallway, thought they had won. But Ethan's fists clenched. That money wasn't for him, it was for Lily, his 5-year-old sister. For her meals, her school supplies, their very survival. Still, he said nothing. He slammed his locker shut and walked on, leaving Jason laughing, clueless about the truth. Yet someone else had been watching. Vin Diesel, who had been in town for a small project, had witnessed much in his life: people who boasted, people who acted tough, people who fought battles they didn't need to fight. And then he noticed Ethan Carter, the boy who never retaliated, the boy who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Something about him didn't feel right. So one evening, Vin decided to follow him. Vin didn't see himself as nosy, but Ethan's presence was unsettling. Perhaps it was the way the boy carried himself, too quiet, too weary, too resigned. Perhaps it was the way others tormented him, shoving, mocking, humiliating, and he absorbed it all silently. Or maybe it was the way he left the cafeteria, stiff-shouldered, expression unreadable, yet with eyes that revealed something deeper than ordinary pain. Whatever it was, Vin needed to understand. So he followed Ethan. Day after day, the boy left school the same way, hurried, silent, no lingering, no chatting, no wasted moments at his locker. He moved with purpose, each step deliberate, head lowered as he walked. Vin kept his distance, following cautiously as Ethan weaved through the quieter streets, avoiding the main roads where anyone might spot him. It was as if he were trying to vanish from the world. Eventually, Ethan arrived at a small, run-down house on the outskirts of town. The paint was flaking, the yard overgrown, a single dim light flickering from the porch. Hardly the place a 16-year-old should be heading to alone. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Then paused, unsure whether to continue following. Then he saw something through the window that froze him in place. A little girl, running toward Ethan the moment he entered, arms thrown around his waist. Ethan bent down, holding her tightly, whispering words Vin couldn't hear. The fatigue in his expression melted into something else: love, warmth, responsibility. He scooped her up and carried her inside, gently shutting the door behind them. That was all Vin needed to see. He had his answer. Ethan wasn't just another bullied kid at school, he was something far greater. He was a brother, raising a child. That night, Vin couldn't get the image out of his mind. He had encountered tough people before, those who acted like they carried the weight of the world. But none had truly borne it the way Ethan did. Ethan wasn't merely surviving high school, he was surviving life itself. And nobody else knew. Nobody else saw. Until now. The following day at school, everything appeared normal. Ethan moved through the halls quietly, almost invisible. Jason and his friends, feeling emboldened by their recent prank, were already plotting their next attack. Today's target? Ethan's shoes. Those sneakers look like they've survived a battle, Brent whispered with a snicker, eyeing Ethan's worn-out pair. Think he's waiting for them to completely fall apart before getting a new pair? Jason grinned. I say we help speed that along. He moved with intent, each step purposeful, head bowed. Then kept a careful distance, trailing behind as Ethan slipped through quiet streets, avoiding the main roads where anyone might spot him. It was as though he wanted to vanish entirely. Finally, Ethan arrived at a small, dilapidated house on the edge of town. The paint was peeling, the lawn overgrown, a single dim light flickered on the porch. Not a place any 16-year-old should be returning to alone. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Then paused, debating whether to leave. Then he saw something that froze him in place through the window. A little girl ran to Ethan the moment he entered, throwing her tiny arms around his waist. Ethan bent down, hugging her tightly, whispering words Vin couldn't hear. The exhaustion on his face softened into something else: love, warmth, responsibility. He lifted her effortlessly and carried her inside, gently closing the door behind him. That was enough for Vin. He finally understood. Ethan wasn't just a bullied kid at school, he was a brother raising a child. That night, Vin couldn't stop thinking about the scene. He had seen many tough people in his life, people who acted like they carried the weight of the world. But none had truly borne it like Ethan. This boy wasn't just surviving high school, he was surviving life, and nobody else saw it. Except Vin. And he wasn't about to ignore it. The next day, school went on as usual. Ethan moved silently through the halls, invisible to most. Jason and his friends, emboldened by previous victories, were already planning their next attack. Today's target? Ethan's shoes. Those sneakers look like they've been through a war, Brent whispered, eyeing Ethan's worn shoes. Think he's waiting for them to fall apart completely before getting a new pair? Jason smirked. I say we help speed the process along. Without another word, Vin straightened and walked away. Jason let out a forced breath, plastering a smirk on his face. Whatever, he muttered, but the laughter had disappeared. The thrill of victory, the sense of satisfaction, all gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, something uncomfortable. For the first time, someone had defended Ethan, and Jason didn't know how to respond. Meanwhile, Ethan was completely unaware of what had transpired. He spent the afternoon at work, scrubbing dishes and ignoring the soreness in his feet. His shift ended late, as usual, and he made his way home under the darkening sky. When he reached his front porch, he froze. A box sat waiting. Confused, he bent down and opened it. Inside was a brand new pair of sneakers, sturdy, high quality, better than anything he had ever owned. Tucked inside was a small note. No one fights alone. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. For the first time in a long while, his eyes burned, not with fatigue or pain, but with something entirely different, hope. The next morning, Jason saw Ethan enter school wearing those new shoes. For the first time, he felt diminished. He couldn't look away. Ethan Carter, the same kid he and his friends had spent weeks humiliating, walked into school confidently wearing brand new sneakers, not the tattered, barely holding together pair he had limped around in the day before. These shoes were solid, clean, and well made. They didn't fit the image Jason had of a powerless, nothing kid. Jason noticed how Ethan carried himself, calm, unshaken, and unbothered. He didn't fight back, didn't argue, didn't even flinch. Supposedly a nobody, supposedly a loser with nothing, Ethan walked the hallways that morning almost untouched by the world's cruelty. For the first time since they had begun tormenting him, Jason felt an unfamiliar doubt. Brent leaned in. Where do you think he got those? Tyler scoffed. Probably stole them. But Jason wasn't convinced. Something didn't add up. He had taken from Ethan before and had seen how little the boy possessed. There was no way he could have afforded those sneakers. Then he remembered yesterday in the cafeteria, Vin Diesel. The man had appeared out of nowhere, defending Ethan like he knew something no one else did. That thought made Jason uneasy. He needed to know more. The day went on as usual, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Ethan than he and his friends had realized. That afternoon, instead of going home, he did something he had never done before. He followed Ethan. Ethan left school the same way he always did, quickly, head down, moving with a sense of purpose that Jason had never thought to question. Jason kept his distance, weaving through the crowds as Ethan disappeared into the quieter parts of town. He expected the boy to head to some rundown part-time job or a crumbling apartment. What he didn't expect was to see Ethan enter a tiny, barely standing house on the outskirts of town. Small, barely enough space for two people, paint peeling from the walls, and a front porch that looked like it might collapse at any moment. Jason frowned. This wasn't just a poor home, it was desperate. He moved closer, staying low, peering through a side window. Inside, he saw Ethan set his bag on a chair and turn just as a little girl ran into the room. She couldn't have been older than 5. Ethan bent down, scooping her up effortlessly, holding her close as she giggled against his shoulder. Jason blinked, completely thrown by the sight of the little sister. He had never imagined it before. He had never heard Ethan speak about family, never mentioned parents or siblings. But now, watching him pull a half-empty carton of milk from a nearly bare fridge, Jason realized something shocking. Ethan wasn't just a struggling kid trying to get by, he was raising his little sister on his own. Jason stepped back, heart racing, mind spinning. He had seen the exhaustion on Ethan's face, noticed how quickly he left school every day, how little money he had, how he never fought back. It wasn't because Ethan was weak. It was because he had no choice. Every penny he earned, every ounce of his energy, went into keeping that little girl safe. And Jason had spent weeks making it worse. Guilt clawed at him like nothing ever had before. He had always thought he was just having fun, teasing Ethan, keeping him in line. But he had never stopped to consider that Ethan had far bigger challenges than schoolyard bullying. He had stolen from him money meant for his sister's food. He had damaged his shoes, likely the only pair he owned. A sick feeling churned in Jason's stomach. He had never felt remorse for bullying anyone, but this was different. He had crossed a line he hadn't even known existed. That night, Jason lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of Ethan cradling his little sister burned in his mind. He thought of the new shoes Ethan had worn that day. Someone had given them to him. Then Diesel. That man had intervened where Jason should have. And for the first time, Jason felt ashamed of who he had become. The next day, Jason stayed silent among his friends. He didn't laugh at their jokes. He didn't join in when they mocked Ethan's quiet nature. Instead, he observed from a distance, thinking, reflecting. By lunchtime, he had made a decision. It wasn't much. It wasn't enough. But it was something. That afternoon, when Ethan returned to his locker, he found something waiting for him. A simple black backpack sat waiting for him, brand new, sturdy, with zippers that actually worked. Inside, a neat stack of bills, exactly the amount that had been stolen from him, and a small, hastily scrawled note. "I owe you one." Ethan stared at it for a long moment. His hands gripped the bag tightly, his throat thick. He didn't need to ask who had left it, he already knew. And for the first time, he realized something had changed. Jason Miller had stopped laughing. Ethan stood at his locker, holding the backpack in his hands. The weight felt strange, the solid material unfamiliar beneath his fingertips. But it wasn't just the bag, it was the money inside. The exact amount that had been taken. And the note. "I owe you one." No name, but Ethan didn't need it. He knew. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt something besides exhaustion, frustration, or the crushing weight of daily survival. It was fragile, unfamiliar, almost impossible to trust. A crack in the pattern, a shift in the balance. Jason Miller, the same person who had mocked him, stolen from him, made him feel small, was now trying to make amends. But why? Ethan wasn't naive. People like Jason didn't change overnight. There had to be a reason. His eyes scanned the cafeteria and found Jason at his usual table. But something was different. Jason wasn't laughing, smirking, or talking to his friends. He just sat there quietly, staring down at his tray, pushing his food around without eating. Brent and Tyler joked and chatted, but Jason didn't respond. He looked lost. Ethan didn't know how to process it. He had spent so long learning to ignore Jason, endure the cruelty, and tune it out. Now, faced with this silent gesture of reparation, he wasn't sure what to feel. Did Jason think a backpack and some money could erase everything? That a single act could make up for weeks of torment? Ethan wasn't sure if he could forgive him, or if he couldn't. That afternoon, as he left school, he felt someone behind him. He turned, expecting another ambush, but instead found Jason a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his usual confidence gone. "I know, you know it was me," Jason muttered, barely meeting Ethan's eyes. He hesitated, exhaling sharply. "I was a dick. I didn't know. I mean, I should have, but I didn't. About Lily. About your parents. About everything." Ethan stiffened. The fact that Jason even knew Lily's name sent a surge of defensiveness through him. "Who told you?" Jason shifted uneasily. "I saw. I followed you. Not in a creepy way. I just needed to understand." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I didn't get it before. I thought you were I don't know, just some quiet loser who didn't care. But I was wrong. You're not weak, Carter. You're stronger than any of us. Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. He had spent so long believing strength was measured by how much he could endure, how well he could protect Lily, how much he could sacrifice. He had never expected Jason Miller to say something like that to him. Jason took a step back, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know I'm done. With all of it. He hesitated, then added, and if anyone else gives you trouble, I'll make sure they don't. Ethan studied him for a long moment, searching for insincerity, for any trace of mockery. But there was none. Just a boy who had spent too long being someone he wasn't proud of, now awkwardly and hesitantly trying to do better. Ethan didn't say thank you. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. But he also didn't walk away. And for Jason, that was enough. Things didn't change overnight. But they did change. Jason stopped laughing at Ethan. Brent and Tyler followed his lead, confused at first, but unwilling to push back against their leader's sudden shift. The cafeteria incident ended. The shoving in the hallways stopped. And though Ethan still kept to himself, avoiding unnecessary conversations, the weight on his shoulders felt just a little lighter. Vin Diesel, observing from a distance, noticed one afternoon after Ethan's shift at the diner. He was leaning against his car, arms crossed, that familiar knowing smirk on his face. So, he said as Ethan approached, I see the kid finally grew a conscience. Ethan exhaled, shaking his head. I don't know what happened. Then nodded thoughtfully. Guilt's a funny thing. Hits you in places you didn't expect. Some people ignore it. Some let it eat them alive. And some. He tilted his head, watching Ethan closely. Try to fix what they've broken. Ethan frowned. Do you think he can? Then considered it for a long moment. I think he's trying. And sometimes that's the hardest part. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He thought about Jason's expression that day outside school, the uncertainty in his voice, the way he had seemed somehow smaller. I don't know if I can ever forgive him, Ethan admitted. Then smiled, a little sadly, a little knowingly. That's not something you owe him. Forgiveness isn't about making him feel better. It's about making sure you don't carry the weight of what he did any longer than you have to. Ethan wasn't sure if he was ready for that, but maybe someday he would be. Winter came, bringing a new reality. Ethan still worked late nights, still picked Lily up from daycare, still did everything he had always done to keep them afloat. But things were different now. One day, he found a small envelope tucked into his locker. No name, no familiar handwriting. Inside was a neatly folded note. The school has a fund for students in need. Some of us pitched in. Just thought you should know. No one should have to do this alone. Ethan stared at it, throat tightening. He didn't need to ask who had left it. A few weeks later, a scholarship application arrived in his mailbox. No questions needed there either. And when Lily came home one evening to find a brand new backpack filled with school supplies, things she had never dared to ask for, Ethan just sat on the couch, pressing his fingers to his temples, exhaling shakily. No one owed him anything. No one had to help. But they did. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't fighting completely alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.